An 11-year-old boy who reportedly wrote a school essay about how great his father figure was died at what authorities are saying his own father's hand inside an airport bathroom. And now, as family and friends try to deal with his shocking death, investigators are taking a closer look at what was happening in the boy's life, his father's life, all that could help explain how this tragedy unfolded. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. 11-year-old Callan West Perez is being remembered by his family as smart, funny, kind, and wise beyond his years. The California boy's short life came to a tragic end at a small regional airport in Nevada, and it was reportedly at the hand of his own father. According to a news release from Elko, Nevada police, they responded to reports of an active shooter at Elko Regional Airport on April 13th. And that is when they found 37-year-old Giovanni Perez dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound near a ticket counter. Traumatized witnesses directed first responders to a nearby restroom. And this is where they found Callan, this little boy, Giovanni's son, with multiple gunshot wounds. They rushed him to a hospital, but he didn't survive. And as investigators started looking into what happened here, they learned more about Callan and his dad and how they even came to be at this small airport. So Elko police say the father and son were traveling in northern Nevada, reportedly on their way to Reno, when their rental car broke down in the small city of Winnemucca. Now, Perez had the car towed to Elko. This is around 2 hours away in the opposite direction of Reno, according to Google Maps, where he had seemingly planned to rent another car. But for some reason, when the pair went into the restroom, that's when things took a horrific turn. Police claim the two entered the bathroom, came back out, then went back in again, and when Perez came out again, he was alone. And I'm going to get into what might have happened there and why that timeline of events, but a couple days after the shooting, police released an updated press release that said, quote, "Through the investigation, we learned that Giovanni claimed he was suffering from PTSD due to his time in the military. We are investigating what Giovanni did in the military. Our detectives have also found through their investigation that Giovanni was in a custody dispute with the maternal grandparents and was attempting to keep Callan from both the maternal grandparents and his own family. We still do not have a motive for this horrific incident and may never know why Callan's life was taken." So Callan's mother spoke with media outlet KUTV, saying she had been separated from Callan for years, but that they stayed in contact by phone. She was reportedly working to regain custody. A reason for the original separation wasn't given. But according to what Callan's mom told KUTV, Perez had served 4 years in the U.S. Army as a cook and was then deployed to Iraq. Now, it's believed that Callan had most recently been living in both California and Utah. And in fact, in a statement to Oxygen, a police spokesperson said, quote, "We do know that they have ties to the Merced, California area, and there was a missing persons report filed out of Clovis, California in December of last year. They were located a month later in Ogden, Utah. Ogden was the last place we believe they were living, but we're trying to follow up on that." Now, I want to give you some perspective about who this little boy was, okay? In 2025, when he was in the 4th grade, Callan won an essay contest organized by the Merced County Office of Education. The county's website says there were nearly 100 submissions from elementary and middle and high school students, and the essays were meant to honor not only biological fathers, but also step-parents and grandparents and siblings or coaches who fulfill that role of a father figure in the student's life. And Callan was one of the students who placed 3rd. However, to be clear, we're not entirely sure if Callan's essay was about Giovanni, Perez, or someone else in his life, but Perez's father and Callan's grandfather, Frank, posted multiple tributes to the two on his Facebook page, including one that said, "Giovanni, I'm so sorry I couldn't get you the help you needed. Callan, I'm sorry the courts failed us. Love dearly, missed eternally." Frank also asked for thoughts and prayers for Callan's younger brother, who was not on the trip. There's a GoFundMe that has been set up to raise money for Callan's family, and I just want to read you what it says in part. Quote, "There are no words that can truly capture the pain, confusion, and heartbreak we are all living through right now. Callan was so much more than this tragedy. He was incredibly smart, funny, kind, wise beyond his years. He had the biggest heart and the sweetest soul, not to mention a smile that lit up every room he entered. He deserved so much more life, so many more laughs, and a future that was stolen far too soon. We're asking for help to give Callan the farewell he deserves and to support his grandmother and the rest of the family during this devastating time. Please help us honor Callan's life and help with a legal fight that will be forthcoming to pursue justice in his name against a system that failed him and to give a voice to other children that are not being protected." All right, I want to bring on Tom Smith right now, retired NYPD detective, co-host of the Gold Shield Show. Hope everybody can check that out. It's phenomenal. Also did an amazing podcast with Juliana, by the way. Tom, these cases are so unique. They're tragic, they're awful, but they're also unique. They're unique in how you investigate it, right? How do you investigate a case like this when it seems like, this is the defendant's dead, right? How far do you investigate it to get answers into something like this and try to make sense of something like this?
Well, just because, everyone is deceased doesn't mean it's not an investigation, it's not a case. So, on the investigative part, it is an active case until you just close up everything that needs to be closed. And these situations in this is so tragic and it's heartbreaking. And you're basically doing more of the investigation for the family to get them some answers of to what happened, why this took place, and why this tragedy occurred. And you're gonna do your due diligence and go into backgrounds and go into social media posts and do interviews of family members about what was going on in this father's life that tragically led to this.
And I'll get into father's life. We talked a little bit about it, but I want your perspective. I find it very interesting this happening at an airport, right? An airport, a very public place like that. A unique crime scene too, right?
It is because now you have a larger area that you need to check out. But the good thing about it, Jesse, is the opportunity to get surveillance tapes and surveillance video of really piecing together when they got there, how they got to that location, the interactions with going in and out of the bathroom once or twice, and then tragically the event happening. So in a larger area, you have more of an opportunity to piece this little puzzle together about what happened.
How do you bring a gun into an airport?
Well, that's the other thing. Certain airports now, the first report was a ticket counter, so I think they didn't get through security yet. So that leads me to believe, and I'm sure you're thinking this too, this was a thought beforehand because he knows he's not going to get through security with that gun. So was this a thought already in his head about where this was going to happen and to take place because of the knowledge that you're in an airport, you're not getting a gun on a plane. So this was going to take place beforehand, which again, the thought of running through your head of taking your son's life and then your own is just a tragic thought.
And going in and out of the bathroom, right? I mean, that was weird too.
Well, I think that had to do with making sure no one else was in there. And kind of looking in and seeing other people in there. He didn't want to do it in front of anyone and waiting till no one was in there to do what he did, which again is just a premeditation and a thought process that is very sad.
There are two other aspects to the background I want to focus on. First, this claim that Giovanni was suffering from PTSD due to his time in the military. How do you investigate that? How do you properly assess that? And if that is true, what does that maybe tell you about this crime?
Yeah, you can definitely look into it. And that's going to be a series of interviews. That's going to be interviewing everyone he's close with, family members, friends, former military friends and comrades that he worked with, even getting background checks and interviews from the military. Did he go for any counseling in the military? What was his job in the military to maybe, bring this on? So there's going to be a series of interviews that are done and evidence collection with anything the family can provide to look into his background.
Is it difficult to get that evidence? I mean, if you're dealing with, let's say it was I don't know if this for sure, but if you're dealing with therapist notes, isn't that privileged information? If you're dealing with military records, are those, are they classified in a way?
Well, the military records, right, it will be a little easier than getting, if he was in the care of a psychologist or someone like that, or a mental health facility, that is going to be difficult to get. But getting the statements and interviews from family members that he was, in fact, going for counseling, or he just refused to go for counseling. So those two things are going to be questions that are going to be answered. And, you can conduct interviews in the military, and they are very well aware of what they will and will not provide, in this case. If there wasn't anything of a classified nature, they will assist in this investigation.
I have to be clear, authorities said, and I mentioned this before, they may never really know what the motive is here. They may never figure that out. But piecing together parts of his background is going to help in some way. This other idea of the custody dispute, where does your mind go there? Where does the investigation go there looking into that?
Yep, and the sad part of this, Jesse, we've dealt with so many cases like this in the past. Me and you have done cases like this, where eliminate the whole PTSD thing and just the go back and forth and domestic issues when it comes to custodies of children. Unfortunately, the end game in this we've seen before, where the mindset is, well, if I can't have my children, no one's going to. And that is so difficult to deal with on that level. But that may be, well, what we're looking at here.
By the way, at the end of this investigation, do they prepare a formal report that they present to the public, to the family? How does it work if you're not dealing with an arrest and an indictment? How does it work in terms of trying to get a conclusion here or trying to assess what happened? Do they prepare some sort of report?
They can, sure. And they could do one of two things. They can present it to the family and let the family know their findings, and maybe even ask the family, do you want us to put this out there? Do you want this made public? And have the family kind of be involved in it a little bit. So, that can certainly be done on a law enforcement level when it comes to a final statement, when and if, like you just said, they come to a solid conclusion in this, which again, like you said, they may never do.
Did you see that part about the missing persons report? I'll repeat it again. In a statement to Oxygen, a police spokesperson that said, we do know that they have ties to Merced, California area, and that there was a missing persons report filed out of Clovis, California in December of last year. They were located a month later in Ogden, Utah. Ogden was the last place we believe they were living, but we're trying to follow up on that.
Yeah, again, that could just be, this is an ongoing thing that's been going on for a long time and not just one specific incident. And that's where interviews are going to be important, of how long this took place. And investigators will put together some sort of timeline of when all this started and where it proceeded and how it proceeded to the end of this, which again took place in that airport.
There's a mention in the GoFundMe of a legal fight that will be forthcoming to pursue justice in his name. Do you know what that might be?
It may be the knowledge of someone else knowing what he was thinking. That's the only thing I can conclude in this. Did he tell someone what he was thinking? Did he tell someone what he may do on this trip? And that person not notifying the authorities or anybody else when it comes to this. That's the only conclusion I can come up with when it comes to that. But that has happened in the past, Jesse, in cases that we've discussed when it comes to something like this. The knowledge of other people, knowing the intent of someone and not telling anyone, can come back to haunt them.
And I know that in these kinds of cases, you may want to go, I go back to Callan's grandfather statement, I'm sorry the courts failed us. There may be an incentive to try to go after the court system, to try to go after any kind of state agencies. That may be difficult in cases like this, right, from your experience?
Yeah, it will be. But it's a fight, I think, worth doing, for this young boy's, memory and the family's resolution in this. Go after them. Anyone they think had a play in this and maybe dropped the ball or fell through the cracks when it came to the custody of this young man, and see where they can do with it.
Tom, from a personal perspective, how does a family even move on from something like this? How do they even process something like this? How do they get a sense of closure? I mean, yes, maybe getting answers as to what happened here will help a bit, but they'll never really recover from this. How do they process something like this? These are the crimes that, you know, are separated from anything else.
Yeah, they're very difficult, Jesse. And to put yourself in their mindset and what they're dealing with in the situation that's in front of them, I can't even imagine. But you hope they have a strong family bond that they can lean on each other and be there for one another and talk to professionals about it with moving on. But I think, again, a lot of this might be the closure of this and finding out the whys. But they're going to be on top of this. And I think just the closeness of this family, I don't know what their faith is, but maybe leaning on that as well.
And also, by the way, law enforcement that responds to this crime scene, that sees this deceased child, I have to imagine that is incredibly difficult for those officers. And do they typically need some sort of counseling afterwards?
Well, that's each officer will go through what they think they need, but those situations and those crime scenes are horrible to deal with. They're horrible to respond with. But it also, again, Jess, we've mentioned this is what police officers do every day. They have to respond to these and take care of the crime scenes and process them the right way. And you, for a moment, have to remove yourself from what you're looking at and not put yourself in anyone else's shoes or situation and just simply do your job. And does that become kind of cold-hearted at times? Maybe, but it's necessary to get past situations like this when you're a police officer.
Just an incredibly difficult, disturbing case to talk about. Tom Smith, thanks for taking the time. As always, we really appreciate you.
Thanks for always having me, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you next time, everybody.